I kept some notes from the other day. I'm just going to read it for you. Oh, this would be a good one. This is in fact, maybe this would be the right way to start it, is I would just read this and then we'll talk about it.
Sure.
Okay. So when we were talking the other day, I got some notes here on my phone. It's about the blockchain and how to make it work in small groups, almost like a jury in order to get refunds. You know, how do you, right now, governments have to have central banks and regulate them. Otherwise, the modern economies would thrive. I mean, you know, you go way back to when they minted coins and all of that, but the government back then, they were the only ones who minted the coin. You go back far enough and it's just gold lumps, well, then I suppose anybody could have it. And you know, so very quickly in ancient history, you had people minting coins and doing things.
Couldn't you have the U.S. government minting blockchain currency?
You could, but why wouldn't you just set it up so that it was regulated in a way that, you know, well, I don't even know if you could. But what I was saying was that you would actually design the blockchain to be self-regulating.
Yeah.
For the ability to, you know, somebody's doing something inappropriate, they could be punished financially by the people who've contributed to the chain recently for some period of time.
It's basically a replacement for it's a replacement for, in some ways, the current appeals process with, let's say, like a credit card.
Right. You take it out of the hands of a corporation and a bunch of people that have got absolutely no need to care whether you get justice or not, and you put it into what I would consider to be a more of an American English type mindset, where you have a jury
of your peers.
Right. So your peers would be the people in the blockchain that have contributed to its value. And so pretty much
who would judge whether you have a reasonable case or not.
Right. So if a majority of those people decided that you didn't have a reasonable case, well, then hey, jury by trial. But the thing is now, could that be
trial by jury,
corrupted or warped in such a way that, you know, criminals could take advantage of it, and, you know, they would buy stuff and then they'd take the money back. And I suppose, you know, maybe we'd only trade blockchains privately amongst ourselves until the value is high enough, and then we'd take it out there. And
well, and this is where, I mean, could you set up some sort of check or balance that, you know, if more than 2 people out of 12 get their money back, and even at that level, maybe you could game the system where 1 out of 12 or 2 out of 12 people buy stuff and get their money back. But at that level, I don't know that you're overly concerned about it. But it's if you get more than that, where, you know, 3 or 5 or whatever of the last number of people say that they've been you know, defrauded.
Well, don't kid yourself. People game the system all the time. That's the reason for the little edges on dimes and things like that, because people would take the old silver dimes and go, hey, this is silver, and they'd shine off the edges. And so they put little ridges on there so that you could tell somebody was carving them off. And so, you know, there's that kind of thing. And so you know, people are always going to game it. The question is, how can you the only reason I was talking about it was in the context of, okay, some large financial institution that's got really, you know, no concern really about being moral in any sense of the word in terms of what the community thinks, but rather has arbitrarily decided to impose some standard. Now, that could be a government that's decided, you know, that everybody's going to wear red, and so we'd call them reds. Oh, no, maybe not. Or maybe, you know, maybe it'd be some bank that's decided, you know, that certain topics are off limits, and and which we've actually seen recently. So then how can you change it so that it takes that ability to be in charge and arbitrary out of the hands of a small number of people? And it probably true whether it's a government or a financial organization or whatever. If the decision making is by a small number of people, they're more error prone than the have you ever heard of the group mind, where a group of us are smarter than just one of us or several of us. And so it's the same kind of thing about shouldn't the community be deciding? But that's kind of that kind of smacks of a free market mentality too, isn't it? Where the market decides rather than the government. So and so then you still get back to, well, yeah, but there's still
my only question is how you set it up in such a way that, and you should be able to figure this out, where if you get a large number, let's say you get some kind of variance, and maybe you bake it into the algorithm, maybe you don't. Maybe you base it on what is the average, and if you're outside the standard deviation for the mean of the blockchain, across the board. So there's the mean number per transaction of issues, and then you have a standard deviation. And maybe if you're outside one or two standard deviations, that's when you kick it to a higher level jury.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that then adjudicates the larger case. So all 12 cases or all 5 cases then go to a larger pool jury if you're outside 1 or 2 standard deviations. Right.
Well, and that kind of gets, I'm a casual mathematician, and statistics grieved me, and probability grieved me. And partly because you could show me the solution and I could agree with you and say, yes, you did it right, or you did it wrong. But then when I had to sit down and do it myself, I invariably varied somewhere off in some other order. And so, some of those statistics, they've got nuances to them, so that until you kind of release it in the wild, it might morph into some weird thing, and so maybe you just release 5 chains into the world, and people find out that if I'm using this one, it's socially responsible, and if I use these other ones, I ended up getting ripped off. And it's kind of like candy machines. When a candy machine rips me off, I don't put coins in there anymore. I mean, it gets kind of discouraging. Even if you can, put a little thing on the side of the envelope and always get your money back, it's the immediate gratification of a candy machine is not served by having to get a refund. And so maybe certain blockchains would give you that immediate gratification, and you would think that the market would then gravitate towards socially responsible blockchains, or maybe not. Maybe they gravitate away from it. But again, you try to build that into them, and you just keep releasing them until you got one that was successful. I mean, how many are out there now? A dozen or more, or whatever.
Tons of them.
So anyway.
And some of it is you use the blockchain that people are willing to use. So some of this gets baked into whether people are going to be willing to use it as a method of payment because of the risk involved in not getting your money. So if you know that 20% of payments get canceled, it's just part of the cost of doing business potentially, where you decide whether it's worth accepting it because all these consumers really love using it, but as a business, I don't want it. Yeah. So maybe I charge a higher percentage, and you sort of get the market factors that compensate for some of those concerns anyway.
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm sitting here trying to figure out how to tell you something, and then I'm really not sure how to put it into words. And some of that stuff's kind of complicated and actually kind of hurts my brain. Now, there's something over here that maybe if I look at it, I guess I thought we were going on too long, so I did that. And that was what I was having trouble thinking, was how to work that in.